Thank you. So firstly, welcome all. As said, this research is part of the Ca' Foscari SPIN-2 2018 FRAC-SISCANEA Project. A part of the work consisted of a survey of existing literature that led to the identification of 1,318 dates from prehistoric and protohistoric sites of southern Caucasus and neighboring regions. The survey aimed at identifying the most complete sequences, but also took into account individual dates coming from different excavations. All dates were divided by period and recorded in a database in order to verify their quality and establish which are the most attested areas and periods, and obtain a quantitative summary of the data which may be used in the future to create reliable models for the area under consideration. The survey is not complete and does not purport to be exhaustive, as data are constantly and very quickly increasing and are dispersed in a large number of publications. Certainly, the data collected are very heterogeneous. The context or the sampling method are sometimes not clearly stated. Sometimes only calibrated dates are published, and the conventional lab value and the standard deviation are missing. This leads to a serious problem. In fact, the use of different calibration curves could affect the chronological interpretation of the dates. Furthermore, the use of different period definition, the lack of an agreed terminology for Southern Caucasus, its cultural fragmentation, and the connection with different neighboring regions make the creation of an overall periodization extremely difficult. As for spatial distribution, if we take into account only the late Chalcolithic to the Iron Age periods, as you can see on the map, we have 86 dates from Azerbaijan, few less than 300 for Georgia, and more than 360 for Armenia. But if we take a closer look at each country, the sites that have more dates at this stage appear to be Gegerot in Armenia, Mentesh Tepe in Azerbaijan, and Aradeti Sorgora in Georgia. We observed that Georgia has a good number of dates for the early Bronze Age and the late Bronze Age, and lower amounts for the late Chalcolithic, Middle Bronze, and Iron Age. A similar trend is visible in Armenia, but with generally higher numbers, especially for the late Bronze. Differently, in Azerbaijan, the late Chalcolithic has the highest number, also compared to the other countries. There is some cover for the early Bronze Age, and numbers drastically decrease for the later periods. The work of the GISCAP team for the present project concentrated on integrating the chronology of the Shida Kartli sites, following the guidelines already established through a constant collaboration with the Weizmann Institute of Science of Israel. Great attention was in fact paid to the reliability of the context of recovery of the samples submitted to analysis, to their quality, and to the prescreening of them. For this aim, a period of common work at Weizmann Institute was necessary to select the best sample to be analyzed. Later on, Bayesian modeling of the obtained determination, based on relevant stratigraphic and ceramic sequence and associated ceramic material, was carried out in close collaboration between my colleagues Andrea Milanese and Francesco Bianchi, and myself and Profs. Elena Rova and Elisabetta Boaretto. The rest of this paper present the Shida Kartli sequence for the early Bronze Kura-Araxes culture and the transition to the following early Kurgan period. In spite of the high number of sites attested in Shida Kartli province in the Kura-Araxes period, only a handful of them highlighted on the map were supported until recently by C14 dates. This was the situation according to the 2014 synthesis. The Shida Kartli sites are ceramically characterized by a high degree of internal homogeneity and less intense external connection. As previously noted, a large part of them belongs to the central part of the Kura-Araxes period, the Kura-Araxes second phase in our regional periodization. We will start with a short review of our new sequence from the multi-layer settlement of Aradeti Sorgora, excavated between 2013 to 2016 by our expedition. The site is located on the western bank of Western Pron River, near its confluence with the Kura. Here we focus on the results of the analysis of the early Bronze Age context. We integrated the 25 dates already discussed in the excellent work by Anna Paola Passerini and colleagues by adding 2 new dates. At the time of the first study, Cura-Araxes levels had been discovered only in field B, but the prosecution of the excavation led to the discovery of a poorly preserved and highly disturbed Cura-Araxes layer in the deep sounding in field A as well. The date from field A comes from a layer of black barn soil, only 2-5 centimeters thick, underlain by a very hard surface looking like a barn floor, maybe the basis of a small temporary structure. Unfortunately, it does not contain diagnostic pottery, but it belongs to a level covered by a level that contains Cura-Araxes pottery mixed with Bedeni ceramic that will be discussed in detail by Andrea Milanese. The level 17 does appear to represent the last Cura-Araxes occupation in field EA. The sample suggests a date around 2900, which is coherent with the Cura-Araxes occupation phase 3 in field B, as attested in the simple model presented by Passerini. As concerned field B, the Cura-Araxes sequence was excavated till virgin soil. It consists of 6 main phases sealed by a large late bronze terracing wall that had partially cut into its top part. In this sector, 2 loci on top of the Cura-Araxes occupation, that will be discussed in detail in the next presentation, gave later dates both around 2400 and 2200 BC. This hypothesized post-Cura-Araxes occupation in field B, located in the 24-23 century BC, follows the Cura-Araxes occupation phase 1, whose start was attributed with by a simple model performed by Passerini, reconfirmed with the new calibration curve, to the 2800 BC. In the simple model, the dates pertaining to the Cura-Araxes occupation are organized in 3 groups, according to the occupation horizon, from the oldest, number 6, to the younger, number 1, indicating a presence at the site from the end of the 31st century to the 29th century BC. Pottery associated to this sequence is not abundant and does not show much internal development. It is, however, clear that it does not belong either to the beginning of the Cura-Araxes tradition or to its final stage, mainly characterized by black varnished ware with incised relief decoration. In other words, it belongs to Cura-Araxes' second phase, in the tripartite periodization we use for the Shida Kartli region. In the future, we intend to integrate the sequence with 1 or 2 additional samples from phase 4, represented by the remains of a probable shrine, on the barn floor of which we found 2 unique ritual zoomorphic vessels with pollen residues suggesting they had contained wine and a jar. The thickness of the deposit is attested between 50 and 80 centimeters, and it mostly contains red-black varnished ware. Another case, the Doglauri Cemetery, is part of the Adradeti Sorgora site. It was extensively investigated by the Georgian team headed by Yulon Gagoshidze in 2012-2015 in the framework of a salvage excavation for the construction of the new Tbilisi highway. But earlier excavation had been carried out since 1970. It yielded a total of 79 excavated Cura-Araxes graves, both individual and collective, and 1 Bedeni grave. 5 samples of human bones were selected for C14 analysis from the Cura-Araxes grave, 2 from individual burials and 3 from collective ones. The samples were pre-treated before radiocarbon testing. They were examined to verify the integrity of the organic portion, that is the collagen protein. Grave 39 is the first of the individual graves analyzed. The sample comes from a simple pit grave, and the burial goods consisted of 2 pottery vessels, a bowl and a small wide-mouthed pot in red-black varnished ware. The second simple pit grave hosts 1 individual and a large red-black varnished ware, one-handled carinated bowl that was lying in front of the chest, and a group of 25 flint arrowheads and a flint spirit in front of the skull. A metal ring heir was also found in this grave. In the stone-covered, stone-lined collective pit grave 51 were buried a total number of 6 subjects of different age and sexes. The grave contained a total of 8 pottery vessels, 3 bowls, black varnished ware, 2 small pots, 1 red-black varnished ware and 1 black varnished, and 3 large wide-mouthed pots, 2 black varnished and 1 red-black varnished ware. And also included numerous small finds in metal, an obsidian arrowhead, a bone spindle ware, and 3 beads of white paste. The stone-covered, stone-lined collective pit grave 54 contained poorly preserved sparse human bones that the anthropological study showed belonged to at least 3 different individuals. 10 ring fragments, not joining, of a closed vessel, possibly a small jar or a jug, and 1 fragment of an oval section handle, probably belonging to the same red-black varnished ware vessel, were discovered in the burial. Furthermore, there were metal hair rings and metal bone and past beads. The last sample was selected from the stone-covered, stone-lined pit grave 97 that hosted at least 6 poorly preserved different individuals. The burial contained some pottery shards of the red-black varnished ware, not joining, but possibly from the same container. A 2-handed closed vessel of an undetermined shape with outturned rounded rim. 1 fragment bears an incised decoration, groups of parallel lines crossing each other. It also contained other metal finds, and some intrusive late bronze shards were, however, also found in this grave. So, the unmodeled plot of the early Bronze Age graves from Doglauri shows that the individual burial grave 39 is older than the others, and the others are quite synchronous, with grave 121 slightly older than the others, aligned with the occupation phase 3 of the settlement. The presence of a single Bedeni grave proves that the cemetery was still in use during the early Kurgan period, but unfortunately no osteological material was preserved from this grave, so we weren't able to C14 test it. By the way, this was a stone-lined pit grave similar to the Kuraraxis one described above, and thus showed that the change in burial custom was not as radical in Shida Kartli as in other regions of the southern Caucasus. Here you can appreciate all the unmodeled dates collected. From the top, we have those from the early Bronze Age cemetery. The single date from the Kuraraxis occupation of Field A from the settlement, and the early Kurgan dates from Field B, that will be better discussed later, and after these, ordered by their stratigraphic sequence, except for the last one, those from the Kuraraxis occupation in Field B. Another and the last case study is Natsargora, that is located in the Kashuri district, circa 7 kilometers to the north of the Kura River Valley, and it consists of a settled small mound and a cemetery, excavated before by a Georgian team and after by the Georgian-Italian team. The stratigraphy revealed 3 different levels: a sequence of late bronze, early Iron Age layers, mostly excavated by Ramishvili expedition, circa 50 centimeters of mixed deposit, disturbed by late bronze intrusion, but also providing weak evidence of early Kurgan period occupation, consisting of few Markopi and numerous Bedeni shards, and at the end, 50 centimeters of Kuraraxis occupation, disturbed by later intrusions, which included a number of Bedeni pits. These layers yielded pottery belonging to the Kuraraxis and to the Bedeni traditions. The Kuraraxis is mostly very similar to that from the cemetery. It can be attributed to the Shida Kartli Kuraraxis second phase, and is very similar to the material from Ardeti Sorgora Doglauri, though with some slightly archaic features. Bedeni pottery mostly came from pits that, as said, cut the earlier Coraxis layer. The area excavated by the Georgian-Italian team in dark gray is situated on the top of the mound to the south and the east of Ramishvili early Bronze Age soundings and extend over 9 5 per 5 meter quadrants for a total excavated surface of circa 200 square meters. Two soundings have reached virgin soil that naturally slopes toward the south and toward the east. The Coraxis sequence, which was divided into sub-phases, consists of a series of 4 centimeter thick layers that represent floors, probably used in the processing of cereals, burned and immediately covered by a new layer of silt. Different types of installation connected with fire were found on the surface. They include typical Coraxis hearths with inner projections, together with rounded or horse-shaped features with a concave bottom, or sometimes composed by a raised ring of clay. In the northern part of the site, remains of round-shaped mud brick huts with no more than 10 cm high mud bricks walls were also recovered. 7 radiocarbon dates were obtained from the settlement. The first one was achieved from an animal bone found during the excavation led by Ramishvili, from a context which contained only Coraxis pottery. It yielded, in fact, a date around 3000 BC. The others are from the Georgian-Italian excavation. From the analysis of the site stratigraphic sequence, the filling contained between the 2 ring-shaped installation 914 belongs to the last Coraxis occupation, and its C14 days is in fact the last one. It might represent the last Coraxis presence before the faint Bedeni occupation, and its date is similar to that of the sample obtained from Ramishvili installation. Associated to the main Coraxis occupational phase are 4 samples. The first one comes from a layer of sediments between 2 phases of an external surface cut by several installations. It contains exclusively Coraxis pottery, except for a few undetermined sherds. The sample collected from the floor 65, a yellow surface associated with fireplace 93, relates to the same sub-phases. Almost coeval is also the sample taken from locus 92, a patch of black barn soil to the east of the fireplace 93. The majority of the associated sherds are Coraxis, but with some late bronze intrusion. The next sample was collected from a tiny layer sealed by a floor, very rich in seed, charcoal, and even small piece of wood. This did not contain diagnostic pottery, but appears to be contemporary with the last 2 showed. Finally, the sample that gave the oldest date came from a locus consisting of a very soft reddish-brown yellowish filling, containing some patches of ashes, which unfortunately lay in a rather disturbed area of excavation. A simple sequential model informed by the stratigraphy was performed from Mazzargora settlement. It includes the data coming from the settlement excavation by the Georgian-Italian team. The 2 groups consist of a later occupation, constituted here by the filling of the fireplace 915, and an earlier occupation. In the earlier occupation group, the data were ordered within a phase according to the C14 age. It appears that the start of the Coraxis occupation is around 3015. For the moment, we have considered also the date from locus 38, although it came from a very disturbed mixed layer. The hypothesis of a rather short occupation during the Coraxis second phase, supported by the associated pottery, which is coherent with the Coraxis second assemblage of this Shida Kartli area, is thus confirmed. Unfortunately, we do not have any dates from the Bedeni occupation of this site, that mainly consists of pits that cut the earlier Coraxis layer. So, to sum up, considering the data of the Coraxis settlements unmodeled and ordered by their conventional age, we can note a wide overlap between Aradetis and Mazzargora, both consistent with an occupation during phase 2 of the Shida Kartli Coraxis period, mainly characterized by red-black varnished ware pottery. The Coraxis occupation at Taradetis appears to last until the transition around 2800 to the Coraxis 3 Shida Kartli phase, with the introduction of black varnished ware, incised and relief decoration. No Marcopi material has yet been recovered at Taradetis, and only a few shells were tentatively identified at Nazargora. As you can see in the slide, a hiatus is suggested between the latest Coraxis occupation at Taradetis and the early Kurgan-Bedeni presence, whose start is quite the same dates attested at Rabati, Bedeni and Tetrizkaro-Kurgan. The sampled bones from the Doglauri graves proved to be contemporary with the settlement occupation. As we can see in the unmodeled plot, all are quite similar, with the individual graves that appear to be slightly earlier than the collective ones. Of course, we will need more data to confirm this hypothesis, and we are in fact planning to test more bones from the Doglauri cemetery. To conclude, the absolute chronology of the transition between the Coraxis culture and the Middle Bronze Age in Shida Kartli and the precise position of the early Kurgan cultures in the region still remain unclear. Clearly, dates from sites, for instance, Sikiagora, Berikledebi, to name only two, and contexts where these phases are attested or less disturbed than our sites, are needed to fill the gaps in our comparative sequence and reach a full evaluation of the phenomenon. Thank you very much.